Well, we are still in Judges. This is the last in a series um, on Gideon. And just to recap where we have been, um, the first one I preached was a call impelled to unfold, talking about Gideon's call and how God said, "You're you're going to be the guy. I need you. I want you." And then Gideon's process of becoming called of God, and then God's glory extolled and retold, and that's basically the most celebrated part of Gideon's life. You know, the 300 with the trumpets, and and they encircle the army, and then the army kills themselves and runs away. And we're at the point where we're following after the people who are running away. So we'll get there. And this one is a legacy eroded as sin exploded. And I have not heard very many messages about the latter part of Gideon's life, because it doesn't end well. And if you want Gideon to be a hero, you kind of just concentrate on all the battle stuff that goes really well. This part doesn't go so well. So are there lessons we can learn from how things just kind of fall apart? Yes, there is. I want to talk about a time my wife and I taught Sunday school for just years and years and years, and we're children's ministry directors and stuff. But we got together and we wanted to talk about the golden rule. And if you can remember, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, also do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. So I just wanted to help the kids get that. And at the time we were teaching it, we had this elementary gym, and it was just huge. So it was great. We had this huge gym, and the kids would come in, they'd start playing immediately, then we'd call them over. And first thing I did was I quoted the golden rule to them. I said, I want to start off with an activity. And then I said it very specifically. I said, this is an activity. I said, what we want to do, so we put up a couple of, tables, and then we gave them some dominoes. And I told them, this is what we're going to do. Now, we've got two tables here. We're going to split into two groups. I want you to take the dominoes, and as quickly as you can, I want you to line the dominoes up so they go across the table the long way. And I want you to be able to hit one, and it'll do that total domino thing. And I want the last domino to be able to fall off the edge of the table. And that's all I want. Okay, this is what I want the two groups to do. I did not tell them it was a competition. I said it was an activity. But as soon as you get two groups and they're side by side, and there's like, this is a competition. I said, okay. So, but they're making their own assessment of the deal. Because as humans, we just kind of make competitions out of things. So they started making this a competition. I kind of knew it would go there, but I didn't know all the things that would happen. And this was kind of fun. And I said, there's one more rule. The other people's at the table that next to you, you cannot go over there and touch their dominoes. That is not allowed. But you can go over and jiggle their table. They said, okay, that's the rules. And they started going. And, they're doing theirs, but they're also looking at the other people, and they're trying to do theirs, and they're looking at the other table. And it was surprising, as one got it a little bit closer, it was interesting to us. Some of the quiet girls, some of the most compliant girls in our class, they were the ones that came over and kind of they were just looking at the table, and as they would turn, they'd bump the little table a little bit. Oh, I'm so sorry. They just go walk over and start giggling, and it was just so interesting. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew if I set up this situation enough, we'd have enough to talk about. So I brought him in at the end. I said, the verse that we talked about, the golden rule, do unto others as you would do unto you. Do you guys understand that wasn't a competition? I was going to see if you were willing, even in these conditions, to do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And those little giving the right conditions, they're willing to sabotage each other. They're willing to make this a competition instead of an activity. They were willing to make it harder for other people for the thinking that they were going to win. And it was just fun to bring out those insights to them, and that they go, okay, I see where you had this going. And then we had other teachings that went on that day, but I always remember that moment because truly it was an experiment, and I wondered what would happen, and they performed just like humans do. And in certain circumstances, we are prone to sin. And we're going to look at Gideon's life, and we're going to see what was the challenge for him. So here's the problem that Gideon had. It was sin in his life. It showed an amazing amount of faith. One of the simplest ways of thinking about it, one of the oldest ways of thinking about sin, is a disordered love. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. It comes from Augustine. But let's take 1 John. Do not love the world or the things of this world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And that's coming out of 1 John 2:15. I want to go through 2:15 and 16 to get a well-rounded. But I just want to bring out what we're talking about. The love of the Father is not in him. If we love the world, it pushes out the love of the Father. Let's go to Matthew 6. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And not only can you not serve God and money, you cannot serve God and anything else in this style of love. See, this devoted, serving kind of love cannot occupy two different spaces in the same heart. We are only made for a focused love of this one sort. And I guess we need to talk about that love because it pushes out the Father. So this love that we're talking about, this love is your highest love, more than a feeling and deeper than a duty. It's a love you put above all other loves. It's a love you sacrifice time, resources, and any other relationship for. This love becomes the focal point of your life. It is what you worship. So this is the quality of love. Now, obviously, there's different thoughts of love. I can love pizza and hot dogs and lasagna at the same time. Maybe in the same meal. Wouldn't that be amazing? But this kind of love, just serving oriented. I would give anything for this. This is what I die on the hill for. This is the love that can only be one part in our heart. And if we put anything else in there other than God, it pushes God out. We can't hold two of these kinds of love in our hearts. It won't function. So God says, it's got to be me first. You got to love me like this first. And if you do, your life will go better. And if something gets in there ahead of me, God says, that's idolatry. That's when you're putting anything else in front of me. And we struggle with it because we will trade off, we will compromise, and our life of sanctification, of becoming closer to God, is a journey of making him number one in every aspect of our lives. He's number one in your marriage. He's number one at your work. He's number one in your home. He's number one everywhere. And that's the life we want to live. Some people talk about, well, you got to have God first and this. True. In every aspect of your life, God's number one. He never leaves that top position. He doesn't want it. You won't work good with it. And it just that's a part of growing up. That's a part of maturing. And that's the part of failing. Anytime we get our love out of disorder, we become disordered. Or we get disorders. I know, it's crazy. So let's, now we got to get the clicker on there again. Somehow I lose it sometimes. I need somebody in the back to put the pointer in place where it's supposed to be. Is it there yet? Okay, here we go. We should be fine the rest of the way. I don't know why it does that. For all of this that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, and the pride of life, it is not from the Father, but is from the world. So he's just saying, and this is identifying, this is a really, really insightful verse, because it really identifies sin only comes from these three categories. And the wide varieties of sin that we do, it only comes from these three categories. And it's interesting, Jesus, when he was tempted in the wilderness, these are the same three categories. These three, and if you study it, it's really interesting. But you can connect every sin in this world back to these three categories. Now, it may be hard to figure out how it works, but we're going to go through Gideon's life, and we're going to use this as a diagnostic tool to help us find it. So, like I said, sin is a disordered love. We get that from St. Augustine of Hippo, but we don't need all that stuff. It's just Augustine. He was a Christian philosopher of the 300s to the mid 400s after Christ, and just a brilliant guy, and really set the tone for what we understand as Christian philosophy and integration into the world. Really helpful. Beyond Paul, he's probably one of the more leading figures to help us with Christian thought. Anyway, so the first one, the desires of the flesh, let's just boil that down so it helps us. That's the desire to feel. And it's not necessarily everybody in our thoughts, like desire to feel. That's the desires of the flesh. That's like pornography. That's like, having an affair. That's you go there, but it's also the desire to feel something. And in our world where life can be so chaotic, some people just do things just to feel something, and then some people do things not to feel something, and that all fits into that category. Sometimes people get into drugs because they want to feel the excitement. This drug has me doing something, or they want to like zone out. I don't want the feelings I have, and I want to numb them. And so that sin, that desire to feel, has both of those components to it. And it's not all about sex, even though that's probably the first thing that our society, hoists up there, the desire to feel. And then the desire of the eyes, this is the desire to have. So what they're saying is what you see is what you want. So this is the desire to have, and that has to do with more of like materialism. I want this, I want that, I want the house, I want that car, I want. And that's a huge thing that trips people up. And then the desire to be, and that we say that's the pride of life. It's like I I want to be esteemed in your eyes. And that will drive me in ways that are ungodly if that becomes the focal point of my life. I want to be important in the community, and I'll do whatever it takes to do that. And if that becomes the focal point of my life and it pushes out God, I will do heinous, horrible things to attain that. It's just what happens. So it's these three areas of life. Every sin fits into them. So it's like a diagnostic tool, and if we're using the Word of God to help us identify them, it's less like a sword and more like a scalpel. God will help excise and get those things out of our life so that we function better. Or, he will operate on us by his Spirit to get the crud out of our lives, these growths that we've allowed in our lives that he wants to get rid of. Okay, there's another diagnostic tool, and I put who goes there, but maybe you're familiar with it. It's been around for a long time, and it's the term HALT. And it's to help to identify within us when we are in an environment where we are more susceptible to making poor decisions. So it's an addiction recovery assessment tool that helps us identify potential conditions and stressors that can lead to poor decision making or sin. Now, not all addictions are sin, but all sins have an addictive, component to it. The more we do, the more we engage in a particular sin, the more we develop an appetite for it. And the more we develop an appetite for it, the stronger we grow in that area. And the stronger we grow in that area, the more that sin gets a hold of us. And we are weaker to it. And every sin will have an addictive component if we let it flourish in our life. And thank God that Jesus gives the power to overcome sin. And sometimes he can do that in a dramatic fashion through a deliverance, but sometimes it is a slow, slogging process to decouple yourself from that sin. And it's a sad thing. I mean, it's a victorious thing to see someone go through that process. Something that hurts your heart to see people be there, but it's a victorious thing to see them walk out of it. But the amount of time that we've spent getting mucked and mired in the sin can be as much time or even longer getting out of it. And we learn lessons, and we learn to lean on God through the process. So it's good. It's a good process, but it's wondrous to see someone walking that out. But it's a process nonetheless. So it's HALT, which is a acronym for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you find yourself in any of these conditions, you're susceptible to making poor choices, right? So let's look at hungry real quick, and we'll just identify some of the ways that it just makes it hard. We are more abrupt and aggressive in our decision making. I think of a dog. If you got a nice dog, just happy, loves to be with you, but you get them by a bowl of food. And if anyway they think that someone's going to have a little bit of their food, they're like, oh, they're hungry, they're aggressive, they're like, this is mine, and it's a natural instinct for them. But we got to understand that we also, when we are hungry, we can be not nice people. I'm sorry, I'm just hungry. And we sacrifice enduring gentleness and generosity in relationships over satisfying a fleeting hunger in our life. Now, you can use hunger for any appetite that we have in our life, right? Because we do have, obviously hunger for food. We have a sexual appetite. There are many appetites that we can have in our life. And if we're in that condition, we can make poor choices. So we need to think about that. When Jesus was in the wilderness after he had fasted for a long time, he was presented with the sin of going outside of God's will and turning stones into bread. And the devil said, "Why don't you just make some stones into bread? You could do that. You're hungry. I mean, why don't you do that?" And sin says, man will not live by bread alone. So he was tempted in the wilderness by the desires of his flesh, and they are legitimate desires. It's a legitimate desire to be hungry. It's a legitimate desire to have a sexual appetite. There's a legitimate, there's many things we can have appetites for. And we just need to bear those under our relationship with God, and it needs to be in the right place. Okay. Angry. We are more impulsive and less patient in our decision making. When I think about the dog. They're not making choices. They're instinctually, you accidentally kicked me or something, and and we want to manage others in our setting forcefully, and we sacrifice relational kindness for control and power. We're like, okay, you're not going to do that to me. You're going to use your anger to intimidate. You're going to use your anger to make people feel small, so you feel a sense of control. Those are times when you're angry where it's, the Bible says, be angry and not sin. Well, that's really hard. Because when people are angry, it's so easy for them to hurt other people. Emotionally, physically, any number of ways. Okay, lonely. We are less self-controlled in our decision-making. Our impulse for connection drives poor choices. We can sacrifice long-term relationships or faithfulness for an immediate sense of feeling, for the sense of feeling of belonging. Lonely people make poor choices. When you're not connected with a community, when you do not have relationships in your life, you're prone to make choices that go outside God's boundaries for a healthy life. It's just what happens. And tired. We are less disciplined and loving in our decision making. We sacrifice abiding peace by avoiding what lovingly needs to be done or needs to be said in favor of a momentary cessation of activity and or emotions. People get tired and they snap. They snap at you, and they'll say, I'm just tired. And they will make their relationships harder by, devaluing people. It's like, shut up, just stop. I don't want to talk. I don't want to have the emotions. I just need, it's hard. So, that's basically, we want to, sometimes it's after the fact that we recognize something within us. I'm just tired. I'm just sorry. I just feel lonely. I was really mad, and those are, if you use that to say, I recognize that in myself, you can say you're sorry about what happened. It's not an excuse, but it's an understanding. And perhaps when you get in those other things and you recognize you're tired or you're lonely, you're hungry, you can recognize, I need to dial that back. I need to understand I'm not in my best decision-making mode, and we can rule ourselves. We can help ourselves through those times when we know. It's like, let me just get a bite of something, before we talk. I need a nap before we continue, because this is just, I'm going off the rails. I can feel it. I know it. There's just ways we can help our environment so that we're not so making poor choices. Okay. Walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. So that's going to help you in those processes, because we all, it's not wrong to be tired. It's not wrong to be hungry. It's not wrong to feel lonely at times. And those are all just normal things we all go through. Okay. All right. So let's look at Gideon. Disordered love. I know I through the series, I titled it something different at the end, but I felt I needed to retitle it. So you weren't prepared anyway. So this is just the new title: A Legacy Eroded and Sin as Sin Exploded. So let's go. Let's look at this now. And we'll be looking at that, how he messed up in, was the sin he's dealing with the desire to feel, the desire to have, or the desire to be. All right, Judges 7. And they captured the two princes of Midian, Orb and Zeb, and they killed Orb at the rock of Orb, and Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb. Then they pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Orb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. And I won't leave that picture up very long because it's just nasty. So this is where we're at. Let's see if we can do this. I always forget is it right there? Okay. So here we have over here, here's where they encircled them, the 300 through the 100, 100, so made 300 of the encampment. And they encircled them, and they lost a heck of a lot of people when the army of Midian and the Amorites and the people of the east, they all started killing each other. Lost a lot of people. So they traveled down this way, and they're headed down this way. This is them and the camels, and then the 300 start pursuing them. And so what we're talking about here, Ephraim gets involved down here. And they start coming after him. Ephraim wasn't invited to the battle, but they just invited themselves. And they show up over here, and then they kind of break off right here, and the two princes go this way, and they probably had a contingent with them, because I don't know why, but they probably broke off, said, you go this way. And sometimes, that's a strategy. They won't get us all if we split up, And so they were doing that. And they were probably, a lot of them, they're coming up this way, up the Jabbok River, and going by the towns. And this is probably one of the major routes that they took to come up into Israel. One would be coming up the Jordan, and then when the other one would be coming down the Jabbok River. So that's pretty much where we're at. Yeah. So Ephraim gets involved in the battle, and why it's not working again? Darn it. I'm sure I have enough battery because the pointer was working fine. See? Laser sights. There we go. Okay. Well, let's go back real quick. Can I get back there? Yeah, okay. Right there. So I just want to put some numbers on this real quick. So the 9,700 that had gone back to they show up. They started, doing a mop-up campaign with all. There was they lost 120,000 people in the valley of Jezreel. The Midianites did. So they're down to 15,000 that are headed up the Jabbok River, So the 300 took them on up here, and then the two princes are headed this way, and then they're headed this way. So it's still 300 to 15,000, or it's like 50 to 1. It's like 50 to 1 still. And Gideon's like, let's go. We're pursuing. We're pursuing. Let's go get him. Let's go get him. Let's go get him. It's just astonishing. Because up here, when they met him the first time, it was 450 to 1. Yeah. But now they're in battle mode, and they're taking off, and they're headed to get him. But when the men of Ephraim said to him, what is this that you have done to us? Not to call us when you went to fight against Midian? And they accused him fiercely. They were mad. They were mad. Gideon was having success, astonishing success. And Gideon had called the tribes that surrounded the area of the valley of Jezreel, say, come on, let's do something. He didn't call Ephraim. Ephraim wasn't called to the battle. It's like, you guys, this is our house. This is our valley. You show up, because these guys have been coming here for years. We're going to do something about this. We're going to do something about this. And Ephraim's like, hey, look at all this success. You should have called us. We would have been part of this success. And you just wonder what's going on in Gideon's mind at this point. Because Gideon's like, well, yeah, you could have showed up and tell us, how do you drink water? We would have sent you home. You guys know how to drink water. We're doing this with the dog lapping boys. We sent most people away. So, I mean, he gotten real defensive, because they were furious at him. But, they had kind of helped him too. I mean, they got the 2 princes that were trying to get away. So what does Gideon do? Because, let's look at what he was experiencing, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I mean, he was probably hungry and tired. I mean, you'd been up all night, right? The whole encircling happened at night. He's been going along. I mean, it's hard to eat when you're doing all this stuff. He's probably hungry and tired. And with these guys getting in his face about this, he's the potential of getting really angry, right? There's potential there. But what about them? What about these guys? These guys were angry. When you have success in your life, and maybe even supernatural success in your life, because God's working in you, you can get enemies from people who are on your side. And it's weird. They're like, shouldn't they be happy for him? Shouldn't be like that, hey, we showed up, we helped you out, go team. Why don't you just guys keep on going? But we had your back. But no, they're like, hey, well, you could have asked us. What are you doing? Just doing stuff all on your own. Now, Ephraim at this point, one of their jewels of Ephraim was Shiloh. And that's where the tabernacle of the Lord had stopped. That's where they are planted at this time. So they were the center of worship. They were like, we've got the tabernacle, it's kind of like we're in charge, So Ephraim's like, you should have told us, you're doing ministry out here, and you really didn't talk to us. You didn't ask us to get involved. You're doing stuff. It seems like God's really a part of this, and I just want you to know that we didn't sanction that. This is the serious. There's some nasty stuff that happens behind the scenes. Churches against churches. It's weird. When you should be on the same team, churches are like, those guys, bunch of idiots. You know, if they're doing something really good and they're affecting change and God seems to be with them, there's a jealousy that can surge forward, and it's kind of sad, but they were mad. And this was a very sinful attitude to take towards Gideon. Just want to say. There's a disordered love. Now they would be dealing with the people from Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim. They would be dealing with the sin to be the pride of life. They wanted to be the top dog. They wanted everybody to know they were the top dog. They had the temple. They had not the temple, but the tabernacle, the place that was like the traveling temple. This is the place where everybody came to worship. This is the center. And their pride was saying, we're it. You should be coming, the ministry should only flow through us. Well, that's just dumb. Ministry flows through anyone God chooses. And it doesn't have to be organized. And sometimes organizations get real uppity about how ministry happens in their midst. All right. And he said to them, what have I done now in comparison to you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the grape harvest of Abiezer? And he's just saying, listen, God has blessed you. And look at your produce. I mean, you guys have amazing things. And to say that they have a great grape harvest is like saying you have the luxury items. You have grapes. You have the sweetness. You have what it takes to make some of the best drink, some of the best raisins. These are the awesome things. And the stuff that's left over after everybody has harvested, the stuff that's left over is better than what we harvest. You guys are amazing. So what are you coming after us for? See, and we got to think about Gideon. He's obviously tired. He was tired, but he's doing this right. I mean, he's like, let me appease you. Let me tell you, you guys are great. And he goes on and said, God has given into your hands the princes of Midian, Orb and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison to you? He's building them up. So look, God's working through you. I mean, we're doing stuff, but look, you got the princes. That's great. You got the generation that's up and coming. You were able to take them out. Thank you. I have their heads now. Woohoo! I got a bunch of heads. Wow. But he's just appeasing them. He's just like saying, and then their anger against him subsided when he said this. So, halt, who's there? Just recognize what you're going. And Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, and he and the 300 men who were with him, exhausted, yet pursuing. I mean, he was just tired. You still have these 300 original guys with him. So he said to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who are following me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. It's like, help us out here. Help, brothers, man, help us out. And he's telling us, we're hungry, we're tired. Help us out. And the officials of Succoth said, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your army? Oh, who goes there? You know? And what are the people of Succoth saying? You know? And their condition is they're probably hungry. They had quite possibly they'd had just an enormous amount of people come down the Jabbok River. And we know that 130,000 ended up in the valley of Jezreel. And some of them came probably up, but some of them came down the Jabbok. They all merged and they go camping. So they just had a ton of people coming through. And this has been happening for years. So this has been hard. Now, they had just seen 50,000. No, I'm sorry, 15,000 go up the river. Like, oh, great. And they're probably going so fast at this time they weren't, looting and pillaging as they went, but they just had 15,000 people go up the river. That's a lot of people. It's not a huge river. But you're not going to miss 15,000. And then trailing behind them is 300 people. And they're saying, hey, why don't you give us some bread because we're going after them. And do you see how ludicrous this sounds? Apart from God? Because they're like, yeah, you're going after them. 50-1. I mean, I don't know if they counted them, but you can just visually see that. 15,000 people going up the river. And you're going to take them on. You're going to take them down with 300. They didn't see what happened earlier in the battle. They didn't see the 135,000 going against 300. They didn't see all that. They just know for years these people have been traipsing up and down this river and just giving them heck. And now, yeah. Oh, are they already in your hands? Oh, we should give you bread. We should help you out. Now, when they say bread back then, you got to understand, meat was only an occasional aspect to their diet. When they said bread, we're talking about a meal. Because when we think bread, it's like, oh, that's a nice thing to have a little bit before dinner. You get a little bread and butter on the rolls, and then you have dinner, and that's really nice. Bread is an accessory to our meals in our Western culture. It is not the main course. Bread would have been the main course back then. A nice, hearty, chuck full of all kinds of nuts and twigs and all kinds of stuff, And it was the centerpiece of the meal. It's you got a big piece of bread and you dipped it in stuff and you used it, to eat with. And it was the main aspect. It was the centerpiece to the meal. So when we talk about bread, especially in the Old Testament, New Testament, they're talking about a meal. It's not just like, oh, would you like a roll? It's different. But they're saying, we're not going to provide you a meal for what has been terrorizing us when obviously you are outnumbered in, and we don't believe God is with you. That's not going to happen. We don't believe in you. Ooh. Well, so Gideon said, well then, when the Lord gives Zebah and Zalmunna into your hands, I will flail your flesh with thorns and of the wilderness and with briars. Because you've done this, I'm gonna remember this. I'm gonna remember this. And when God gives me the victory, I will be vengeful. I will come back and I will humiliate you. This is not a good decision. Not a good decision at all. I mean, by this time, Gideon is hungry, angry, and tired. And he's like, you guys, just wait. And vengeance You know, out of all of this disordered loves, he's saying to them, you guys should have treated me better. You guys should have fed me. I am important. I should be taken care of. I'm doing God's thing. Why are you treating me like this? You're going to pay. We're dealing with the sin of B. He's not humble. He's not, okay, I get it. You guys have been traumatized for years, so have we. You don't know God's at work here. He could have been graceful. He could have said, okay, you're not helping out, but we're going to do this thing, and we're going to come back, and we're going to let you know there's something to praise God about. And you missed your opportunity. But he doesn't say that. He said, I'm going to get you, sucker. I'm going to get you. Yeah, he was dealing with the sin of the desire to be. He thought he was something. And this is just a view of the Jabbok River. They call it the Zaraka River now. And up on top of here, right here, there's some ruins, and that would be the place of the next city that they come to after Succoth is Penuel. And at this ford of the river here, this is the same place where Jacob, in his fleeing from Laban, his brother-in-law, this is where he wrestled with God. So this is a significant area, and people settled there. And I bet they had a sense of pride. I mean, this is where Jacob was first called Israel, the ones who strives with God. This is that area right here. And they made the settlement up on the hill and still called it Penuel, that place where he forded the river. So it'd be more of a fortification to be on top of it. You always choose the higher ground if you can. So this is that area. And from there he went up to Penuel, and he spoke to them in the same way. And that's gives you a different shot of it, different look of it. And you can see the how the river kind of goes up in this way, and the road kind of winds around. And anyway, and the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth answered him. They said, no way, we're not going to give you anything. No, we don't believe in you. So he said to the men of Penuel, when I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. What is that? Isn't this interesting? He says, in peace. When I've brought peace to this region, when I've taken care of what God said I was going to take care of, I'm not going to forget you guys. And though it's peacetime, I will wreck your lives. You will suffer for what you just did. He's not interested in building people up. He's interested in tearing them down, that he would be the important guy. It's sad. It's just sickening, actually. So, yeah, I think at this point, Gideon's hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. He's lonely because he's like, nobody is joining me. I had, these Ephraimites get mad at me because I didn't have them. Now I'm asking people to be a part of this, and they're saying no. And the leadership, he's like going, is it just going to be me? And God's saying, I'm here. You can rely on me. I know you're hungry. They're not giving you food, but listen. I mean, when Jesus said that, after the woman in the well, it's just a really significant thing that he said. and his disciples came back. The woman in the well, had traipsed off and was going to start telling people about Jesus. And his disciples are like going, man, how did you do this? You didn't have any food. And Jesus says, I have food that you know not of, is the food of doing the will of my Father. And that's enough to get you by in moments like this, that Gideon need to know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Just like the temptation in the wilderness, when Jesus was confronted with that. And Gideon could have toughened it up. He said, okay, we're going to keep going. God will supply what we need. And he did. He had enough to finish out the job. The thing that Gideon said, we're not going to get here without food. When you are pressed to the limit, make the good choices. Don't say, I was just hungry, so I'm just going to fly off the handle. Don't do it. Don't do it. Control yourself. Figure it out. Do the will of the Father and let his Spirit fill you with that in those moments. He knows you have need to eat. Bear up. Man up. Woman up. Do whatever that is up. In Deuteronomy, it says, and it's good to remember, vengeance is mine and recompense for a time when their foot shall slip, for the day of their calamity is at hand, at their doom, and their doom comes swiftly. It is so important for us to remember when people are coming against us to rely on God's judgment, God's grace to handle it. That we say, I'm not going to get you, sucker. I'm going to let the God get you. And that gives us enough time. Maybe God will show grace to them. And you're like, I don't want God to show grace to them. I just want you to, me not do it, but you give them, God, and just give them enough time. And maybe your heart will change back to a grace-filled moment. And maybe you won't damage someone through the process because they didn't see God working in your life and you said, help me. Buckle up. It's hard. But recognize the environment you're in. Do the right thing. Keep standing. So, here's where we're at. Now, Zeba and Zalmunna were in Kaker, and their army, about 15,000 men, all who were left of the army of the people of the east. For there had fallen 120,000 men who drew the sword, and Gideon went up by the way of the tent dwellers in the east of Nobah and I don't know, and attacked the army, and the army felt secure. So this is what happened. All of the camel jockeys come down, and they come down around this way, and they go right here, and they're probably looking back saying, is anybody following us? Is anybody following us? But this is what Gideon did. He brought his 300 men, and he came around this way. Gideon's so good at as taking the surprise angle. I mean, he's brave, he's a tactician, but he's smart, and he comes around the other side and he freaks the army out. This is some Midianite ruins. This isn't the place where they're at right now, but this is the place where the Midianites were trying to get back to. And Zeba and Zalmunna fled, and they pursued them, and they captured the two kings of Midian, Zeba and Zalmunna, and he threw the army into a panic. So it's 300 people against 15,000. And because God was on his side, and fear was instilled in the enemy because Gideon was following God's directive. He wasn't doing it in the best way, and he was creating a lot of havoc through the process, but he was still following God's directive. We're going to stop these Midianites from coming here year after year after year, and this is going to stop now, and I'm going to use you, Gideon. And Gideon made a lot of mistakes through the process, and we're learning about his mistakes and some of his really good decisions. He was brilliant at times, and that's one thing we can admire about him. And then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, and he captured the young man of Succoth, and he questioned him. And he wrote down for him the officials and elders of Succoth, 77 men. He finds this guy, says, okay, tell us the names. Who are the people? Who are the leaders of the town? We want names. And the guy gives him the names. And he came to the men of Succoth and said, behold, Zelba and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, are the hands of Zelba and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are exhausted? And I just bet it had that tone. I mean, he was taunting them. He was like, here they are. Here's the two kings. These are them. Probably, maybe they were, their camels still had all their, royal garb on, and they were all, they stuck out in a crowd, and they probably said, hey, there's the kings, as they were riding up the river. It's like, you can't miss them. And purple flowing, and, all their regalia, and they're like, this is the way it is. And he took the elders of the city, and he took thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth a lesson. He humiliated them. He wanted to humiliate them. He said he would humiliate them, and he was vengeful. He didn't let God take care of it. He didn't take this as an opportunity to grow their faith and give them a chance to repent. They might have repented. They might have. No. He didn't let them. And he broke down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the city. This is a disordered love. I mean, he's wreaking vengeance. And, it had to do with, that aspect that he thought he should have been treated better. Man, when we get into that attitude, it's like, they can't treat me like that. I'm more important, and I'm more important than them. And they should pay homage to me. And I should not be treated like this. You're not really acting like a servant. We're called to be servants. The challenge of a servant is when you're asked to be one, do you rise to the occasion? Now, if we decide to be a servant, I'm going to serve you, I'm going to try to make this really good, but the test comes when you're treated like a servant. You're treated like someone that's below them, and do you accept that role? For the aspect, it's like, okay, all right, I'm going to serve. Serving in the challenging situations is where our character is built. And we have that opportunity. And when it comes, do we show up? Do we notice, okay, I need to be humble. I need to cultivate humility in my life. I need to make that a cornerstone of my character. Because of all the topics in the Bible, number one, talking about character, the first one is love, and the second one is humility. If people can't see that we are humble in our service, we've got some growth potential in that area. Humble yourself. Be humble. All right. And then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, where are the men whom you killed at Tabor? They answered, as you are, so were they. Every one of them resembled a son of a king. And he said, they were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you. Well, there's some dynamics going on there, isn't there? I said, you guys killed my brothers, right? And they said, yeah. And they looked like kings. Like you. You look like a king. Wow. I bet Gideon really liked hearing that from the enemy. Hey, you look like a king. We killed your brothers. In the Near East and many different parts of the world, it didn't happen all the time, but it happened enough that some people thought maybe that should happen. Some of the lords and some of the kings and some of the rulers thought this should always happen. That if you go into battle, kill everyone else, but leave the kings. Don't kill them. Nope, don't kill them because they're the important people. So the kings weren't as afraid to lead people into battle because, man, it's just everybody else that gets killed. They're going to save me. Maybe, But these guys, nah, not Midianites. They didn't care. If you look like a king, they'd kill you too. So there was no respect from the Midianites. And Gideon saying, I'm not going to respect you either. I mean, they had spared their life up to that point, but there was no mercy. Maybe there shouldn't have been. Maybe God would have said, yeah, you take these guys out too. But the thing is, he didn't ask God about this. Did not ask him. So he were still dealing with him having the pride of life. So he went to Jether, his firstborn. Rise and kill them. But the young man did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a young man. Here we go again. Not only was Gideon's vengeance going to be, enacted upon them, but he was going to humiliate them by having his little boy, his young man, kill them. But unfortunately, he was so young, he was afraid. He was tagging along in battle, but I don't know if he was doing much. Maybe he's just watching Dad do stuff. But he was like, he freaked. He was just too young. So, but he wants to humiliate them. Gideon's like, I want to be important. I want my family to be important. And if my family's going to be important, I'm going to give them the opportunity to kill these princes, these kings of Midian that have been marauding us. I'm going to humiliate them. They were humiliated. 300 people taking down an army of 135, and then, it gets to 15, and they're still running away from 300 men. They were but Gideon just wants to pour it on Just wants to pour it on. Total vengeance. It's a disordered love. And then Zebah and Zalmunna said, "Rise yourselves and fall upon us. For this man is for as a man is, so is his strength." And Gideon rose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and he took the crescent ornaments that were on the necks of their camels. So yeah, the kings, knowing that they weren't getting out of this situation, they taunted back. It's like, you do it. You do it. Because your young boy doesn't have enough strength. You better do it, Gideon. So Gideon does it. And then he takes the ornaments. Let's look at those. These would be ornaments that are, put around the camels. Would signify the wealth of the rider, the position of the rider, and Gideon takes those. Now, God was very clear, and was very clear in battles what he wanted to be done with spoils. And it was very important to him because armies could become very mercenary if, as they were defeating a foe, they started, it's like, hey, we could get some stuff out of this, and just in the time of when they were coming into like Jericho, and Achan took some stuff for himself, where God says, don't take stuff. And then, when they went against Ai, it went really bad. And God said, the reason why it went bad is someone took stuff. Gideon, as their leader, starts taking stuff. This battle was God's. The overwhelming odds, and just because Gideon was a brilliant tactician, Gideon was very courageous, just because of those things, Gideon was rather full of himself, and he thought the battle was his. And he started taking God's glory. And God would oftentimes say, either destroy everything, or whatever you get, you put it in the temple. But you were not supposed to act like mercenaries. Because once a nation feels like it can bully other nations in getting their wealth, it's a bad deal. And it happens all the time. So this is what Gideon does. He takes the ornaments. And they were around their necks, and he sees something. This is have the desire of the eyes. He wants what they have. But that's intermixed with the desire to be. Gideon's like, these are the things that they said make them important. I don't have camels, but I want their stuff. Because it made them important, it'll make me important. So you have these sins weaved together. Because not all the sins are all separate or one, but they can weave together. And he wanted to be important, so he took things that made him important. Here's a relief carving. And the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us and your sons and your grandsons also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." And this is interesting. The people saw Gideon, because I think Gideon was taking the credit. Now, this can happen, whether Gideon was taking the credit or not, but they definitely saw Gideon taking the credit. And they're saying, "Man, this is great. Midian is not, would you rule over us? Be our king. We would like a king. We would like someone to do this all the time. We would like not to have these years of oppression that we've suffered under the Midianites, and who knows what's next, but be our king. You're fabulous. This is working out well." This is an Assyrian relief carving. The one on the left is a king and the servants, doing stuff that pays homage to him. There's a bunch of, icons in here that, tell us all that. But anyway, it's just, I thought I'd show it to you. And Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Now, that's a great statement. That is a wonderful statement. This is what was happening in the times of the judges. There were no kings. Did Gideon mean that? He may have meant it in the moment, but character is assessed over life, over a long term. And we'll see, maybe Gideon waffled on this statement. It's a really strong statement, but maybe he didn't mean it. Or maybe he meant it a little bit then. He caught up in the moment, but it didn't last. There's a grouping of male earrings from ancient Jordan, from ancient Jordan. So this would be a little later in the time period, but I mean, it'd probably be very similar. So back then, definitely the men wear earrings back then of the Ishmaelites. These are the people from Midian. They would be coming through Jordan and stuff. But they were a little lower. But the jewelry may have been very similar to what you're seeing right there. And this is found in a big hoard that they found. Someone had a vast supply of jewelry and they buried it or something. And they found it. Anyway, that's kind of what the guys were wearing in their earrings. Quite a variety. Very sun and crescent oriented. Having to do with their deities and stuff, and big purses, like we got a lot of money. Interesting though. And Gideon said to them, let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw in it the earrings of his spoil. So, I mean, they're in this process. But the whole army was like, oh, hey, there's a dead guy. He's got an earring. I'm just going to take that, put them in pocket. And just keep on going. Hey, there's a lot of earrings. I got a lot of earrings. And they're still fighting the battle, but they're plundering as they go too. And Gideon says, I see you guys doing that. You know what? Why don't you throw in all the earrings and why don't you give those to me? And they're like, okay, we'll do that. Can you remember a story where someone invited, from the Old Testament, in which someone said, hey, why don't you give me all the earrings and let's do something with that? Do you guys remember any stories like that? It was Aaron. And he said, why don't you give me some of those earrings that the Egyptians gave you when you left? Can you give me some of those? And he fashioned a golden calf out of it. Gideon knows these stories. Gideon has already demonstrated how much he understood, but he didn't get the lessons. Making that golden calf was a bad idea. What is Gideon going to use his earrings for? Well, maybe he has a redemptive thing to use it for. Well, let's find out. Gideon. And the weight of those golden earrings he requested was 1,700 shekels, or about 71 pounds of gold, which is about a liter or about a quart. Gold is heavy. When you get that much concentrated. Have you ever pick up one of those lead weights and you're like, oh, those are pretty small, but oh man, they're heavy. Gold is like right there. It's just heavy. So now Gideon's getting weighed down by all this stuff. He's like 70 pounds trying to carry that. And the average height of Israelites about this time is about 5 foot nothing. They were short. And he's carrying around 70 extra pounds. He probably had some servants, carry the gold for me. I want the gold, but I don't want to carry it. I don't know. Anyway, that's a lot of gold. And besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels. I mean, dude was starting to get loaded up. He's getting nice clothes. He's got all this stuff now. Gideon's starting to bring things together like he's going to rule. I mean, he said, I'm not going to rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. But he's thinking in his mind, but yeah, he's going to use me. He's going to use me. I'm going to be the leader because look at me now. I'm leading and I just don't want to stop. And this is what he does. And Gideon made an ephod of it, putting it in the city of Ophrah, and all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So no, he didn't make a golden calf out of it. He made an ephod. Ephods were vestments, or this thing that represented all the 12 tribes. It was only to be worn by priests. It was only to be in the tabernacle, which was where Ephraim was from, in Shiloh. He made an ephod out of it. He didn't take it to, he didn't say, here's a great new ephod. Oh, this is a present. This is a memorial of what happened. He says, I'm going to take one of the symbols of worship, one of the symbols of the priesthood, and I'm going to take it to my town. And instead, it became a snare to his whole family because he was going outside of God's will and saying, it's mine. This is going to be the center of worship. This is, I'm going to have the power. I'm starting a new thing here. It's being done by me. God hasn't been using any of you, but he's been using me, so we're going to do it here now. And all Israel whored after it. They're like, okay. All Israel whored after it. It's to say that they were going away from God to do what Gideon said, let's do this now. God did not change his law in the Old Testament saying, well, if something goes real well, why don't you just move the center of worship outside the tabernacle? Let's do this somewhere else then. No. It's a disordered love. That desire to have this shiny thing, to make the shiny thing, and how that would make him feel. His pride was being stroked. He was not humble. Here's some Midianite petroglyphs. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more in the land, had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. So this is a great thing. This is what God wanted. It was achieved as Gideon bumbled his way through it and had really brilliant moments, but really set his legacy up for erosion and dismay and disarray, and just everything went really horrible because the people were whoring after something, and it was against God. This is present-day Shechem, where Gideon's son Abimelech was born here. And Jerubbabel, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son. And he called his name Abimelech. My father is the king. Derived from Avi, my father, and Melech, king. So, did Gideon mean it? Said, no, I will not rule over you. My sons will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And he named his kid, hey, my dad's the king. Whatever he said in that moment, whether he felt it in that moment or he was just lying, it didn't turn out that way. Because my dad's the king. You name your kid that. Is it just not obvious that you want to be king? And he had 70 wives. God, man, multiple wives do not work out. I mean, no matter how many times you see it in the Old Testament, it just falls apart. There's horrible consequences. It's just not good. I haven't asked my wife, but I think she would say no. I don't get another one. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good to check in. Yeah. It didn't have anyone else in mind. Good. Yeah. But kings would do that. And this is what Gideon's doing. He thought himself a king, so he multiple wives. So, he gave in to that temptation to feel that lust of the flesh. He 70 wives, he was having sex anytime he wanted to. He was having kids all over the place. And he had enough money to take care of them. And this made him feel important. He was a very prideful man. And it was the downfall of his country because he was a leader. It was the downfall of his family because Abimelech, the son of one of his concubines that lived in Shechem, not Shechem, but right? Oh, yeah. Anyway, that son killed all the rest of his other sons except one. So all of his siring other offspring, all of his, infidelity, really, all of that died as a result of his behavior. Were killed, were executed by Abimelech. It's tragic. And Abimelech was not a judge, but he called himself the king of Shechem. And one of the most wicked rulers that Israel ever saw. And he only lasted 3 years, and then people rose up and like, no more of you. We're done with you. He was horrible. Gideon had a lousy legacy because of his pride. Because he couldn't control himself. And he wanted stuff. All of those more than God. And he put those things ahead of God. His love was out of order. It was disordered. But here's the thing. In Hebrews 11:32 and 34, let's just read that. And what more shall we say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel, and the prophets who, through their faith, conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of a sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty warriors, and put foreign armies to flight. we've been talking a lot about how Gideon was messed up. He was flawed. He had amazing courage, and he was brilliant on the battlefield, and he did a lot with the little God gave him. But you know what? He was a hero. He was in this hall this of faith that's in Hebrews 11. It's a feature of faith. It is a feature of the Old Testament that they put Gideon in company with these people. We are also flawed. We also mess up. And God can use us mightily. God used Gideon mightily. See, the sin of Gideon and this disordered love to feel and to have and to be where he messed up so much, we got to turn that around. And we've got to order our love in the right way. So we need to feel content in what we've been given. Contentment fights against that desire to feel, that lust of the flesh, that desire to satisfy our appetites. We need to embrace what God has given us and say, I will be happy with what I have. And we should not feed on things that are outside God's will. Be content with what you have. Foster that in your life. Thank God for what you have instead of noticing what you don't have, because that will feed your discontent. Thank God. I mean, if you can't, you just find things. Well, thank God for this bowl of oatmeal. This is all I have right now. Thank God for this cup of coffee. I got a cup of coffee. Thank God. I don't like coffee, but anyway, some of you guys might think coffee. Thank God that I have this couch to sit on. Thank God I have, thank God for things in your life. And your contentment level will rise. And you'll be in a right place before God, and your temptations against going outside of his will you'll push against that. To have a generous heart, the lust of the eyes, the desire to want, the desire to have things. The way you combat that is have a generous heart. Give things away. Practice generosity. Figure it out. Be generous to the church. Be generous to others. Be generous with your time, treasure, talents. If you have that ability, be generous. Work at it. Figure it out. Make it a priority. It will do wonders in your life. Be humble. That's how you combat that sense of pride. Put yourself in a humble place. When someone excoriates you, when someone's, find out anything good in what they said and say, I can take that. Some of the other stuff, that's not of God, but find a way to be humble in it. It's hard. It's not easy. But the more you practice your humility, the more you go into that, the more you'll feel the Spirit of God rising up with you and you'll be able to give people grace. It's what you have to do. Okay, we're done. Let me say this. Gideon Gideon said he didn't want to be a king, but he wanted to be the king. Christ was the king. And he said, I will humble myself. Gideon wanted to amass all that he saw that was shiny and wonderful. And God walked away from streets that were paved with gold to live in a humble way amongst us, giving all the finery and luxury, or all the amazement of heaven, so that he could be with us. And Gideon was a proud man, but Jesus humbled himself. We want to be like him. Lord, we thank you that you are our example. You mold and shape us into the people you want us to be. Let your Spirit guide us. We pray in your name. Amen.